Lieutenant Commander, the Duke of Edinburgh, was appointed to the command of HMS Magpie.
For a man of action, one used to giving orders and driving strategy, the role of royal consort was never going to be an easy one. It took time before Prince Philip could find himself a role. His struggle here in the Tyne Tees Face the Press programme, clear to see.
Could you tell me, what is your job in your own mind?
I feel that I may have a position, or whatever influence I have, or whatever influence I have, I want to use for the benefit of the country. It seems to me that the essence of any community which has a head, and every community and every social structure has a head of some kind, that they traditionally and fundamentally have to concern themselves with the interests of the people that they head. Well, I find myself at one remove from this position. Therefore, I feel that I ought to be doing my best for the community. This is really in whatever way I can.
Their Royal Highnesses are staying with Vice Admiral Lord Mountbatten and...
For the first 3 or 4 years of his marriage, he lived the life of a naval officer, and the then Princess Elizabeth, a naval officer's wife. But when George VI died, their lives changed forever.
I asked Prince Philip once about February 1952, the time of the accession. And he fell silent for a moment, and he said, yes, the late king died, and everything changed. For the Queen, it was clear. The Queen's duties became paramount. Her job was there. But for Prince Philip, what was he to do? There were people telling him what not to do. And basically they were saying to him, in his words, keep out. He was literally, he said, kept at bay. He was, there were rooms he wasn't allowed to go into, boxes he couldn't open.
The Prince was an accomplished sportsman and played polo professionally for many years. After retiring from polo, he took up carriage driving, and it was Philip who introduced the modern horse-driving trials. But activity wasn't enough. He needed purpose.
Elizabeth came to the throne much earlier than she and Philip had expected. They had expected her to come to the throne at 40, so they'd have a long time together as a young couple. And certainly when Elizabeth came to the throne, it was the end of all Philip's independence, the end of his life as an ordinary naval officer, which they had enjoyed working in the Navy. From now on, he was going to have to be the consort. He was going to have to be 2 steps behind the Queen.
The Duke of Edinburgh, on leave from his naval duties, flew back from Malta and was welcomed at London Airport.
It wasn't long before he came into his own. The Prince had plans for a new kind of post-war monarchy, one that would engage with the people and champion big causes.
Members came from all over the world to the Duke's study conference on the human problems of industrial communities within the Commonwealth and Empire.
On the back of the royal couple's tour of the Commonwealth, he launched a series of Commonwealth study conferences, providing a forum for future leaders to debate issues as varied as the Cold War and workers' rights.
That all people are primarily citizens and not just workers with a bit of private life. I see no advantage in a prosperous and powerful state if it is to be achieved at the expense of human freedom and happiness.
And almost from the beginning, Prince Philip made his voice heard in the fledgling environmental movement.
It's totally useless for a lot of well-meaning people to wring their hands in conference and to point out the dangers of pollution or destruction of the countryside if no one is willing or capable of taking any action. It'll be so much effluent under the bridge unless it is followed by drastic political action.
But not everyone welcomed his interventions.
There were a lot of difficulties in the early years. He faced a lot of people who didn't really like him, and he ruffled a lot of feathers by his moves to sort of modernise the workings of the palace.
So he immersed himself increasingly in his charities and projects, more than 800 of them, many focusing on the young and echoing his own love of sport.
Who done that? I'm about fed up with you. You ain't dragging our tongues onto you. Come!
He took charge of the National Playing Fields Association. Its remit to make sure all children had access to green open space.
What do you want to see me about?
And it was a charity he remained involved with throughout his life.
Ceramics, the art of pottery making, to use them.
But it was the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme, launched in 1956, with which he became the most associated. It offered any activity you could think of: pottery making, Highland dancing, life-saving, firefighting.
These are the boys of Dunstable Grammar School out on fire practice, ably assisted by the local fire brigade. Or should that be the other way around?
The idea was, and is, to teach life skills outside school. Anyone between the ages of 14 and 24 can take part. So while Philip excelled at being the Queen's consort, he also left a lasting legacy. He was once asked what was his greatest achievement.
If you had to look back on your time so far, what would you like to feel that you'd done which was of benefit to this country?
I don't really know. I think perhaps the only thing I can think of is the offhand is the introduction of the award scheme, which I think has had an influence, in a sense, far beyond the people who've taken part in it, in the sense that it's, I think, liberalized the educational system. People have tended to recognize that that education is more than just reading and writing.
So while his life was lived in the shadow of the Queen, he still made his mark. The longest marriage in recorded royal history. An extraordinary partnership that spanned more than 70 years.